22nd, 2012, talking to Sophia Rachfal Stroz, my great aunt. So Aunt Sophie, tell us when you were born, what year you were born.
1919,
and
August the 15th.
How many brothers and sisters did you have, and where do you fall in the lineup?
Oh, well, I'm next to the last, and there were 7 of us. I think there were 7. Mary, Frank, Carl, Mike, Joe, me,
And
Catherine, who died.
okay,
She died before, when she was only 2 or something.
So you're the last remaining
Sibling, yes.
child of Martian and Ludwika Rachfal.
Right.
So let's talk about them. What we know is that they're from Galicia, Poland. Galicia, Poland. They didn't know each other there.
No.
They met after they came to America.
Right.
And they both came over on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. Constitution, right?
I think that's the name of it. You remember better than I do.
And a grandma, she came over as a young girl,
She was about 17.
17, with a cousin, I think, who went to Katanning.
Trafford.
Went to Trafford after they got off the boat. Do you remember
No, really, I don't, Janet.
what she told you? She went to go live with her sister.
Yeah, she went to live with her sister. Her sister did live in, I think it was in Trafford. She was married already.
And what was her sister's name?
Catherine.
Catherine. So her sister, Catherine, was one of 2 sisters. The other sister she left behind in Poland, and that sister's name was...
You know, I don't remember.
You don't remember the
sister's
sister's
name? Did your mother ever
name?
mention her name? I don't remember her name.
No, but her maiden name was Yahar.
Yahar. I don't know the first name. I think it was a brother, Janet's not a sister, a brother. She had a sister in Trafford.
Okay.
Lived in Trafford. But she had a brother, I think, who was a Yahar.
Yahar.
Yeah, or somebody not a brother, a cousin or somebody related to them. Their name was Yahar. They lived in Ohio.
Okay.
That's a much, we didn't.
You went to visit them once when you were little.
We did one time when I was in my teens. It was a nice visit. I didn't really know them, but it was nice. Excuse me.
And then she had another relative lived in Katanning, right?
No.
No?
No.
No, did your father have a relative in Katanning?
I don't know any of my father's relatives.
Okay.
If you know them, you know more than I do.
No, I thought there was somebody up there, but I guess not. Now so she came over and she went, the interesting story is when she was on the boat, she got lice.
Lice.
Tell us about that story.
They had to have $15 on them when they landed in America. And she had so many lice on her because they were tourists, that's all. And she got so mad that she just tore that shirt off and threw it in the river. And her $15 went bye-bye with that shirt. So then they arranged for one of the relatives to get off, and he came along the side where she was going down, and he handed her the $15 she needed to get in. He just passed it on to her, the one he used. And that's how she got into America.
Her cousin gave it to her. And when she got off the boat, they couldn't spell her name, and so they said, your name is Lucy.
Yeah, Lucy. So she told them it was Ludwika, and she tried to spell it for them, and she had broken English. You know, she didn't have
She could hardly speak any English.
Yeah, so it ended up with Ludwika. the way she told him to spell it,
He said Lucy.
Lucy. So they called her Lucy.
So, how long did she live with her sister?
I really don't know.
Her sister was married to,
She lived with her.
was her older sister.
Was that her sister she lived with? I'm trying to remember.
You said Catherine.
Catherine. It must have been her sister.
And
She was older than Mother, and her health was poor.
her last name was
Grohosky.
Grohosky. And
Her husband worked in the steel mills in Trafford City. That's where they lived.
they had children.
Yeah, they had 4. Madeline, Helen, Madeline, Steffi. What was the boy's name? Isn't that terrible? I'm losing my memory.
But you used to go, Joe, and you used to go and visit them. You and your sister Mary.
Yeah, every summer we went there for vacation. My sister Mary and me, we went there, and she'd go home. She'd take me there, and she'd go back home after a few days, and I stayed for the whole summer. And I spent all my summers there. It was a regular thing. And one day my kid brother came with us.
Joe.
Joe, he was he was a lively kid. He's climbing, they had a beautiful cherry tree. And their house, in the back, they had a beautiful porch, and they had a beautiful porch in the front house. And if you went up the bathroom upstairs, you could climb out the window on the roof and pick the cherries off that tree. And he would climb out, and he would climb in the trees. And oh, my Aunt, poor Aunt, was so worried that he'd fallen and hurt himself. And so she didn't want him coming back anymore. They didn't want him coming back because he was just got into too much. So, but that used to be my every summer. That was my haunt. I spent all my summers there.
So, you got married when you were 27.
27.
To Thaddeus Stroz.
Right.
And your anniversary would have been a couple days ago. Was the April 19th. What year did you get married?
Let's say
40?
42, I think.
42? Was after the war.
After the war.
Tell us about your courtship with Teddy.
Well,
He wanted to marry you, and you kept turning him down.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't even go date him, let alone marry him.
He saw you when you were 14 and said, "That's a girl for me."
In school. See, we had a class, we had a class in school, and we were in the same class. And
He was older than you.
he was older than me, he was 4 years older than me. And I couldn't see him for dust. And but he seemed to have a case on me. And he never approached me, never bothered me. And I guess he's a secret admirer. And but then one day, my mother, with his father, he was painting houses. But he was naturally a draftsman, was what he wanted to be. And he was painting with his father. And they came and painted, and my mother had a frame house.
On 18th Street.
On 18th Street, and they came and painted the house. And that's how I met him. He came, painted the house, and so evidently he still liked me because he found an excuse to stay. And again, we fed him supper, and from then on, occasionally we dated, and pretty soon we married.
But he went to war.
He went to the war, yeah.
And he wrote you letters.
Oh yes, beautiful letters. He was a good cartoonist. He'd draw me comic on the envelope. He'd draw comic pictures in the letters, and he would write me lovely letters. And I wrote to him every day because he was overseas. I wrote him to the APO, and
He was in France and
France,
Normandy.
Normandy.
He
yeah.
and England,
I think he went to England too.
and he was a sergeant,
Yeah, he was first sergeant.
first sergeant, and he sent you pictures.
He didn't want to be an officer. I said, "Why didn't you be a commissioned officer?" He said, "I want to be an officer. I had more fun being a sergeant." And to see him, Ted was a big husky man. And to look at him, you think he's a sergeant?
But he looked like David Niven.
Yeah, he did. He remembered. So you looked at him and you thought of David Niven. Yeah, he was, and he was such a nice, quiet person. He had a nice personality. I liked him.
And he signed them, your darling Teddy,
Oh,
right?
Many endearing terms. He wrote lovely letters.
And he kept asking you to marry him, and you kept turning him down.
Yeah, I wasn't interested in marriage. I was a young girl. Wouldn't I want to be married? I had a good time.
You were a supervisor at Bell Telephone.
Yes, I supervised Bell Telephone. I was in long distance. Not long lines, long distance. Yeah, and I liked the job. I liked long distance. I liked meeting people who would stay at the hotels. One day I met Catherine Hepburn come on the line. You couldn't help but know her with that voice she had. She was real sweet. And we picked different, anytime the hotel lights would light up, I'd pick them up because I'd wonder, who's this today? And we had it was interesting. I liked being a telephone operator. And I became supervisor.
So how did he win you over finally that you agreed?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm trying to think of what happened. I don't really know. It just happened. My eyes must have got opened and what a nice person he was. And I guess I really don't know.
But then you got married in a suit,
Oh yeah.
and Uncle Joe was the best man,
Best man.
and
Your mother.
my mother Clara, your niece, was your maid of
Maid
honor.
of honor. Yeah, we were married by just to the peace. Yeah, I wasn't no parts of churches.
And where did you go for your honeymoon?
Where did we go for our honeymoon? I know
Did you go to New York?
we went to the William Penn Hotel, spent the night there. Then we took off. Where did we go? I'm trying to remember where we went.
Was it Washington,
Washington,
D.C.?
D.C. We didn't go to New York.
That's right. Well, you went to Washington, D.C. for your honeymoon.
Uh-huh.
And you had a beautiful hat
Oh,
with
yeah.
roses on it.
I don't know if I still have it, but I had that hat for a long time. It was a cute, saucy little thing. It was pink with a lot of flowers on it. That was the only fancy thing in my outfit, because I just wore a sort of an aqua-colored suit, silk wool suit, and a blouse. And that was the only fancy thing that hat. I had it for a long time. And I
We
finally
have
got rid of it.
pictures. We have pictures.
Yeah, pictures of it. One of the older sisters liked it, so I gave it to her.
So now, Mom was married to Carmen. She
Yes.
got married before you,
Oh yes, many, many years before me.
of course, because
She
Clara
first
was
born.
your maid of honor and she was 16.
Yeah,
So, so they were married 16 years before you got married.
yeah.
And Joe and Frank and Mike were in the service too.
They were on the service.
And they were all married, and Frank married Rose.
Frank married Rose,
Carl married Millie.
Mm-hmm.
Joe married
Joe.
Marie.
Marie.
And Mike married, what was Mike's wife's name?
Trying to think of him. Is that terrible?
Was she a Millie too?
No. Trying to think of why can't I think of her name? I think she was a Rose.
Rose too. I know it was with the two.
My oldest brother's wife was Rose.
So
her
Frank was your oldest brother, and he just died a couple years ago at 96,
94.
94.
Mm-hmm.
And he has 4 children.
4 children.
Richard, Renee, Russell and Ronald.
Yeah.
And they all have children. And Carl, he died a long time ago when I was a little girl.
Yeah.
And he had Sandy and Butch,
Carl Jr.
Carl Jr., Kenny,
And
Kenneth.
Mm-hmm.
And then Mike had Andrea, Cheryl,
and
Michael,
young Michael, that's all.
and Joe didn't have any kids.
No, Joe had no children.
And then Catherine was the baby that died.
Yeah.
She was 2.
Yeah. She died shortly after childbirth.
And Grandma, when you married Uncle Teddy, she came to live with you.
Oh yes, she lived with us from then on.
Now let's talk about her.
Okay.
She, when she came to live with you, that was about 1950, right?
Somewhere in there.
Well, or no, when you bought your house, it was about 1950, right?
I think it was at 47.
Because you got married in 47, you lived with her, right?
Yeah, around 1950, I guess.
Then you bought a house in Brookline.
Yeah.
And then that's when you started studying. Mom and Pap and my mother and her sister Donna and you and Uncle Teddy.
We studied with Brother Dawson.
And you studied with Brother Dawson. You all got baptized together. Right?
I think we did.
Yeah, in New York.
I think we did. I know we
That was 53.
We got baptized in New York. But I think your mother and dad were baptized before we were.
No, you all got baptized together.
Did we? Okay.
Yes. But my father didn't. But, so then tell us, but before then, that wasn't your first hearing about Jehovah, and tell us about what the day your father heard this meeting going on.
Yeah, if it wasn't for my father, we probably wouldn't be in the truth today. He was, I wish I'd really known him. I was too young to appreciate him. I think I was only about 2 when he died. And he evidently loved the truth, because my mother said that he was walking past this place down on the south side on 14th Street. It was the second floor. There was a meeting hall up there, and Jehovah's Witnesses were having a meeting up there. And they were called Bible students. And he was walking by in here, and down that street there, because that was where we lived on the south side. And he was intrigued with what he was hearing, so he goes upstairs and he listens. And first thing you know, he sits down. And he's listening and listening, and he liked what he hears. And he was supposed to be home watching the children. Because my mother went to the meeting, and he was supposed to be home watching the children. And she spots him at the meeting. She was furious, because she knew he left the children unattended. And that's when, then that was where we saw the photo drama of creation. That was unusual at that time. They had a moving picture with voice. And that had never been done before. Jehovah's Witnesses were the first one to do that. And it was quite a picture. It showed Jehovah's Witnesses in action. It was quite good. I remember that. And what else is there that I remember about that? I don't remember much more.
But he, so he right away got rid of everything. He said, "This is the last Christmas."
Oh yes, we always suffered because we couldn't afford a tree. So my father, we had oleanders, and he'd always trim one of those oleanders up. But after that, no more oleander trees, and no more Christmas trees out of them. They were still just oleanders, and no more Christmases. And that's when we start doing away with all pagan things.
So but you didn't really formally, because he died at age 45 of trigonosis.
Really young.
After that, Grandma had to go to work to keep the 6 children together, and she worked scrubbing floors downtown in the Coppers building and the lawyers building, and she traveled by foot.
Honey, she was at the natural gas company.
And she did that too. And she walked.
I don't know if she walked.
She walked to work. And you kids, when you kids went to sleep, that's when she went to work.
Yeah, she went to work and
scrubbed floors
scrubbed
to
floors.
Keep her kids together.
Mm-hmm. She had a hard life. She wasn't easy. She really sacrificed a lot. The welfare wanted to take us. She said, nothing doing there. My kids, I take care of them. She wouldn't let them take us. She really worked hard. She raised all of us. And none of us suffered malnutrition or anything. She went to second-hand stores and bought clothes from my brothers, because they went through trousers like crazy, you know. Our kids were. And she'd go buy clothes at the second-hand store for them. And we got along, we survived. We did better, I think, than a lot of people who had parents working, you know. 2 working parents, I mean. We did grow well. As well as could be expected. We never were hungry, even if we didn't have a fancy meal. I remember one night my mother made a big pot of rice. She cooked rice and put milk in it and put an egg in it, and it was nourishing, and that's what we had one day for our dinner. And it was filling. So she always managed to see that we were well fed. She might go without food herself, but we were fed.
So she went to a few meetings in Polish when she could.
Yeah.
And she took you kids a couple of times and left you there a couple of times.
But then she, when we grew up there, the boys didn't want any parts of the truth. They wandered away. But I didn't go anywhere for a while, except we went to Sunday school for a while. But then we didn't go that even. But then later on, I think your mother, people called in your father, where your father worked.
Yeah.
He met Jehovah's Witnesses, brother Dawson, Claude Dawson, worked very
with Pap.
with your father.
With Pap. With Pap, they met Pap.
Yeah, and they worked.
Carmen.
With him. It was in a ship place, building ships or something, and they worked with him, and he took every advantage of letting them know Bible truths, and then he had his son Bob, come to the house, and he ended up preaching or teaching us.
But way before that, your father met the Dugans.
Oh yeah, the Dugans out in West Virginia.
In Burgettstown, they were both working in the mills, in the coal mine.
He preached to them.
In the coal mine,
My father preached to him. He worked in coal mines. My father did all.
They knew the Dugans back then, and he.
They became very good friends. I always thought they were relatives, but they were just good friends of the family. They were lovely friends. They helped my mother a lot. When my father died, they really helped my mother. It was a good family. They were lovely people.
So, she died, Grandma died in 1967 when I was 7 years old, and of pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
And,
painful way to go.
Yeah. and so she was living with you at the time,
Yes.
and
lived
she was
with-
going to the meetings
We always
at
took her
South
with us.
Hills congregation.
Yeah, we always took her with us. We told her, Teddy told her, as long as we're alive, Mom, you have a place with us.
So, but she said her husband, he believed he was going to heaven.
Yeah.
She believed she in the earthly
Class.
hope. So we'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see
Yeah.
if he shows up or not. But at that time, they all thought they were going to heaven when he was learning the truth. So we're not sure. So we just go by
Wait
what
and
he
see.
said.
Wait and see.
Wait and see. So, but he was married before he met her. And his wife and his baby died on the way over to America on the ship.
They died, yeah. He had one child.
So he left America, he left Poland
Came to
as a young groom. He was married a year with a baby, and he arrived to America as a widow. So I think he was 27 and she was 21 when they got married, right? Somewhere around there?
It was about 7 or 8 years difference between them.
Yeah. So, and then they had 6 children together.
I
So
really wish I'd known him.
but he made you a merry-go-round.
Oh yes, he was a handyman. He was talented that way. He made a merry-go-round that he cranked by hand. And I don't know if it had 4 seats on it or 5. And my brother, I never saw it, but the family tells me that they had, he sat there and he cranked it by hand.
And
it went around.
he made lots of toys.
Oh yeah, he made toys for them.
And he made window boxes filled with flowers.
Oh yeah, he loved flowers.
And he loved to laugh and play and have fun and sing.
Yeah, he was a cheerful person.
And he worked at one time at the Smith Glass Company and the Jeanette Glass Company.
And down the south side, he worked at the glass company in the
And
south
he
side.
brought home all kinds of glass.
Yeah. They would, if they had a small damage or something on them, a defect, they just set them aside, get rid of them. So those people who wanted them took them home.
So you had lots of pretty things in your house.
Yeah, but as kids, we broke a lot of them. My mother, they had in those days, they used doilies on the furniture that hung down the sides. And we were kids, we'd pull the doilies and down came everything. So.
But you had a whole big, remember Mom saying when he died, you were living in Burgettstown, and they had to leave behind a big trunk full of glassware because there was no room to bring. You moved back to Pittsburgh.
That's where I understand it.
And you left all that glassware behind.
Left it behind the Dugan family.
And Mom
father.
said there were beautiful decanters and cordial glasses
Oh,
and
sets.
wine glasses.
They were
and
sets, beautiful sets, but my mother, she couldn't handle them, She said, what do I want with them? She left them with the Dugans. And I
So-
guess the Dugans gave them away,
But tell us about his death, because that was interesting. He had black lung from working in the coal mines, and then he went and had a meal with a neighbor. And they were in a
No.
hurry.
He was at home. My mother made a meal, and
No, the neighbor. He went to the neighbor's house, and she cooked the pork.
Well, I was under the understanding it was our house, my mother, and he wouldn't wait till it was cooked, and he ate it. So I might have a wrong understanding.
The story I
I don't
remember
know.
you told me is that he was with a friend at a neighbor's house, and they were in a hurry to go down to. It was payday, and they liked to go down to the local pub.
Uh-huh.
and they'd sing and dance
Had a
and
good time.
have a good time, and they were in a hurry, and
Get there.
they were hurrying her up to get the meal done,
Yeah.
and the
And they
pork
ate it half well done.
wasn't quite done, and
Trichinosis.
because he was in weakened condition, he got sick.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember the story, all the things they did to help him get well? Mom told me.
Your mom might know more than I do.
They
but-
put him in a barrel,
Well, see,
hot,
your mother was older than me.
homemade remedies. They tried to get him better. They put him in a barrel of some hot,
Well, you know more than I do, honey.
hot baths.
I can believe they might have done anything because they
And
had a
then
lot of
the
nerve.
woman came over crying. She was very upset. She felt terrible.
That I don't remember. Your mother probably
Mom told
you.
me. And they tried and they tried, and finally they took him to the hospital,
And that's where he.
and that's where he died. But the whole
Scenario.
the town, there was a Polish community. Everybody came in and tried the different home remedies to try and get him better.
Oh,
But it was too bad, and he got sick. Now tell us about Mom got sick real bad when you were little, and what you did. She got rheumatic fever.
oh, she had rheumatic fever. I was in my early teens then, and we were living on 18th Street then. And she had rheumatic fever. Oh, that poor woman was in pain. And I remember we would rub turpentine on her, and that burns, and I didn't have gloves on, and I rubbed this turpentine on her to give her relief. Boy, those hands. I had a friend whose brother had a car, and she took me for a ride, and I rode with my hands out the window to cool them off. They were so hot from that turpentine. Oh my, it was really painful, but it finally eased up. That was an experience.
But Mom had arthritis after that,
Yeah, she
and
ended
she
up
suffered
in
her whole life
Whole
with
life.
chronic pain.
Yeah, I felt bad for your mother. She had that arthritis so bad, but she didn't let it keep her back. She kept going, doing things, even with those bad legs. She pushed on. Your mother was
Hard worker.
She wanted to do something, she did it, no matter how it hurt. She'd even prepare big meals at here. She liked to cook. She'd make spaghetti and invite friends in.
Yeah, she was a good cook.
Yeah, she loved to cook, and she liked company.
And your brothers worked at the bakery. They were bakers.
United Baking Company. One was a baker, and then later, my youngest brother worked there, and he became a bread slicer. He wasn't a baker, he was a bread slicer. But then one brother moved to California, and he got
Frank.
a job there as a baker.
Yeah.
And so
And Mike moved to Arizona,
Mike moved to Arizona.
and so and Carl died. He lived here too, and he died. And so it was you, Mom, and Joe.
Left.
And so in order of their death, it was Carl first. Well, it was Catherine as a baby, but then Carl died after he was married with children of a heart attack, right?
Yeah, Carl had heart
Attack.
He was in the hospital, and he was doing good. He was playing cards with the men, and all of a sudden he went heart attack on him.
But everybody else lived a long life into their
fairly long
into
life.
their 80s and 90s.
My oldest brother Frank lived to be 94.
And Joe lived to be 80.
He was 89, I think.
Mom was 87.
87.
And
I have a record book out there with their ages.
and we don't know. Mike was.
Mike didn't die young either.
He lived a long time.
Mike didn't get. Joe got into the Army, but Mike didn't. Joe joined the Navy, but Mike, he went in like the tail end of the Army. He didn't have any hard time. But Carl was too old, and he never saw the service. And he was a married man, so they wouldn't take him. And Frank, of course, was too old for the service. They didn't take him a certain age. So none of them, except for Joe, who served us in this service, we didn't have anybody that was in the service that was lost in the service.
And then, so we don't know much about your father's family
No.
at all.
Well, we know that he had been married before he married my mother, and that's all we know. We don't know anything about. There's one family relative, it's the Yahars in Ohio that we knew.
That was your mother's side.
Yeah, that's the only ones we knew. We never.
But your
knew
father's side, we don't.
ain't nobody that I know of. We have a picture of him and a lot of people with him, but we don't know. We never met any of his family.
And that's what we're trying to research and see what we can find out about the Rachfals.
Yeah.
Because he was Rachfal in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember anything about the story about how your parents met?
Not really.
They were both in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
They had been here a couple of years. So let's see, she was 21, so if she got here when she was 17.
Yeah, I was awfully young then. I wouldn't.
It was about, if I recall, he was here about 2 years when he met her.
So you know your mother.
But I
being
don't
older-
remember where or how they met.
You see, your mother being older would know more about that than I did. I was too young.
You mean Mom, but Mom is gone.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I just remember from what Mom told me.
Oh, not your mother, your grandmother.
Yeah, but I don't remember. I don't remember that she knew how they met.
I don't know whether she did or not. We never talked about it, your mother and I, or your grandmother and I. We never talked much about it.
So now tell us about your cousins. You had cousins you were real close to. Helen?
Helen, yeah, they were my mother's, they were my aunt, my mother's sister. And they were her children. And their father was Frank Grahowski, and he worked in the mill there in Trafford.
But your cousin Helen, you were good friends with. You stayed in contact with for a long time.
For a
And
long time. I
her
stayed-
last name was Labarsky?
Labarsky, yes. And she lived there for a while. When she came to live in Pittsburgh, she stayed with us. Instead of paying somewhere else to live, my mother said, come live with us.
She married a
She
Labarsky.
married Stanley Labarsky, who was a doctor. And
where did they live?
they lived in Mount Lebanon. I don't know the address, but they lived in Mount Lebanon. But Stanley was a lovely person, but he got migraine headaches so bad that he couldn't even keep a practice going. So he would have had a lucrative practice, but with his terrible migraine headaches, he couldn't keep it up. But they managed real well.
And how many children did they have?
Helen, let's see. Helen Lamar's, how many children did she have? Isn't that funny? I don't remember. Do you know?
No.
Does your mother remember? How many children did Helen have? I know her sister Madeline had some children, but I don't know how many. They didn't visit us. We weren't real close with any of them.
So we got 1 minute left. What do you want to say about your life, Aunt Sophie?
I have no complaints.
What has been the greatest joy of your life?
Becoming acquainted with the truth.
So what do you want people to know about how you spent your life?
I try to spend it serving Jehovah.
Has it been worth it?
Very definitely.
It's a good life.
I don't know what I'd have done without it.
That's a good way to end. So that's my grandparents' wedding picture.